I stopped counting how many family members, how many relatives, how many neighbors, how many friends, how many teachers, how many students I have lost.
Did you think this project would grow to the point where you are here in the studio in Washington, D.C., promoting a book that is endorsed by Ta-Nehisi Coates on the front cover?
The book is an answer to why October 7th happened.
All the propaganda and all of the lies of Israel can be refuted by just telling them my story. And that's what we are doing. We're telling the world stories from Gaza.
Anytime you have oppression and you've tried all sorts of nonviolent ways and they don't work, some people are going to resort to violence. That is human nature.
You've described, Pam, this book, this project, as a different way for Palestinians to resist Israeli occupation. What do you mean by that exactly?
These are not professional writers. This is their sort of raw, uncut stories. And trust me, this is an act of resistance for them.
Since Zeteo's founding, we've interviewed several authors who have written books on Gaza, all of whom focused on the ugliness of Israel's genocide from different perspectives. The book we're about to discuss, however, is different. Like the story of Palestine itself, the writing of this book did not start on October the 7th, 2023. In this case, it was 8 years prior, in 2015. It has both darkness and light in its pages, hope and suffering in its lines, and some of its authors have sadly already been killed by Israel's unchecked brutality. We Are Not Numbers is a collection of essays, poems, and stories written by Palestinians in Gaza, mentored by a cohort of professionals who wanted to do more for the people there and highlight the humanity of those who have been so utterly dehumanized. The book, which has been in the making for over 10 years and was released in the US just last month, was compiled by freelance writer and social justice activist Pam Bailey and Palestinian journalist and author Ahmed Alnaouq. Both are co-founders of the We Are Not Numbers project, which shares stories from the next generation of Palestinian writers and leaders. Pam Bailey joins me here in the studio in Washington, D.C., and Ahmed Alnaouq joins me remotely from London. Thank you both for coming on the show. Ahmed, let me start with you. We've spoken before. And before we get to the book, I just got to ask again. We spoke after October the 7th, as the genocide was kicking off. Back when I was at MSNBC, you had lost family members at the time. I have to ask again, I'm so sorry for all your loss, but how much loss have you suffered since we last spoke?
I lost count, Mehdi. On October 2023, I lost 21 members of my family when Israel bombed my home while they were sleeping. And ever since, I lost count. I stopped counting how many family members, how many relatives, how many neighbors, how many friends, how many teachers, how many students I have lost. Unfortunately, it's scary just to contemplate the magnitude of suffering and pain that has been inflicted on the Palestinians in Gaza. And as I say, we are not numbers, and I refuse to count the family members and the relatives that I lost to this genocide.
Well said. Depressing to have to hear you say that, but very well put there, that We Are Not Numbers, which is the name of the book. Whoever reads this book will see your story as the first among a lineup of fascinating writings from Palestinian authors in Gaza. But before you get there, before the intro and the glossary, in the dedications page, Ahmed, we see a line that honors the writers who were featured in this book, but were sadly killed by Israel before it was published. Among those names is Mahmoud, your 25-year-old brother, who was sadly killed within weeks of this genocide kicking off. May he rest in peace. How does it feel to be part of immortalizing your brother in print after he's gone?
Mahmoud, my younger brother, he was one of the nicest people you could ever meet. He was a hardworking man. He was a writer. He used to work at NGOs, and he was a man who deserved to live in peace and dignity. He had a future ahead of him, and he did not deserve in this barbaric way. He was killed with all of his family members, with his father, with his brother, his sisters, nieces, and nephews. And in 2024, when Israel killed my first brother, I promised myself and I promised the world that I will never stop talking about my brother Ayman, who Israel killed and who inspired the creation of We Are Not Numbers. And then when Israel killed my other brother and other family members, I promised myself again that I will, until the day I die, I will keep talking about my family members. I will keep talking about Mahmoud. Everyone needs to hear Mahmoud's story. Everyone needs to read Mahmoud's story. He should not be forgotten. And I believe writing is a way in which we can immortalize the stories of our loved ones. It is a way in which we can immortalize the stories of the Palestinian people. And Mahmoud is just another person, another writer of the many, many writers and journalists Israel killed. And he has a story. He had a story that needs to be told, and needs to be immortalized. And this book is a dedication to Mahmoud, to the other 3 writers who were killed, and also the co-founder of We Are Not Numbers, Rifat Al-Arir, who was also killed, who was assassinated for writing tweets.
Yes, he was. The book is called We Are Not Numbers. It is out now, available for purchase. Pam, the project started with you and Ahmed in 2015. 10 years later, you two together have helped facilitate the writing of, I believe, 1,300 stories by 323 young people in Gaza. Did you think this project would grow to the point where you are here in the studio in Washington, D.C., promoting a book that is endorsed by Ta-Nehisi Coates on the front cover?
No, I mean, we had high hopes, but you know, to be honest with you, it's sort of bittersweet.
Yes.
Because on the one hand, you just highlighted this huge success, more than we ever really could imagine. On the other hand, we are at a place that's worse than when this project started. You know, the idea for this project came about after the 2014 war, which at the time seemed like it was going to be the worst. It was going to go down in history as the worst. And the name was chosen because in the very beginning, we were writing stories to make sure that all the individuals who had been killed in 2014 were remembered and not just lumped together as big numbers. And the promise, in a way, to the writers who joined with us in doing it and started writing more about Gaza life was that the power of stories, if more people could be exposed to the reality of living in Gaza and their own humanity and how similar they are to everybody else, that this could wake people up, you know, and have the possibility, at least, of changing things.
Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to Zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
You know, and on the one hand, it has waken people up. If you look at the public opinion polls in the U.S., just recently,
for the first time, the American public is more pro-Palestinian than it is pro-Israeli, according to labor.
But on the other hand, we also, at the same time, and it's a jarring reality, find ourselves at the worst point ever.
Yes.
And so when I was going through all those over 1,000 stories, you know, that you mentioned, to choose the ones for the book, I found myself feeling like I had somehow failed them, because I really thought, I never would have predicted, to be honest, not only this great of a success, but I wouldn't have predicted that we'd be in the situation we're in now.
I don't think anyone did.
Yeah.
The book features, as you say, just some of the 1,300 stories that this project has managed to put together over the years. It features a lot of authors who we've had on this show over the past couple of years. Palestinian poet Mossab Abu Toha, who's now a Zeteo contributor, Palestinian journalist Hind Quduri, we've had her on from Gaza. Was there a story or poem or essay that stands out to you from this book out of the rest, one that's lingered in your mind longer than the rest?
Well, I think, one is the original story, the one that Ahmed and I worked on. What was so important, and the reason why that story galvanized me to say we need to get more of these out, is because Ahmed's brother was a member of the resistance.
This is Ahmed.
And yes.
Ayman, sorry.
Yeah, Ayman, right. And we don't hear stories like that. We only hear about them as caricatures, terrorists. And realizing that, you know, Ahmed, when we first worked in this story together, he was reluctant to tell me that part of his story, because he assumed that once I heard that his brother was a resistance fighter, that I would immediately lose interest, not care about his brother anymore. And of course, by that time, he had told me all about Ayman as a child and what he had experienced. And we need to understand what makes people decide to join a fight, you know, like this. So I think there's a that always stuck in my head, is these are stories people do not hear.
Yeah.
But also, I think what's important, some of the stories that stick out are the ordinary ones. Young people who are writing about just the joy of spending an afternoon by the sea. You know, a young girl struggling with her weight And how does that affect her self-esteem? And realize that people could read that, they'd say, oh, I relate to that.
Yes.
If it wasn't for the circumstance, if it wasn't for the chance of where they were born, that could be you, that could be me.
But it is also the erasure of their humanity, which you are restoring by publishing a book that says we are not numbers, we are real people with real stories. Ahmed, Pam mentions your brother Ahmed. You mentioned him as well. He was killed by an Israeli missile in 2014. In just a few pages, you take readers across the most important moments in your brother's life. Pain, trauma, hardship, the anger that eventually leads him to join an armed group. A couple of questions for you. One, how come you never followed in those footsteps of your brother? What made you guys go in different directions? And two, given the last 2 years of pain and suffering and trauma, how many more young Palestinians are waking up right now saying we have to join armed groups, there's no other option?
These are a difficult question, but I think the answer is very easy. I decided not to join my brother because partially because I believe that we are not numbers is the way forward. I'm someone who wholeheartedly believes in the peaceful resistance of the Palestinians, who's someone who believes that writing stories is way more powerful than anything else. And because I am a peaceful man, I'm someone who believes in the peaceful resistance against occupation, not to undermine the other options that the Palestinians have taken against the occupation. And unfortunately, Mehdi, the more you pressure the Palestinians, the most you inflict more pain and suffering with the Palestinian people. The more you besiege them, the more you bomb them, the more you kill many, many family members of them. Many of them will find themselves going to that direction. And I always say that if Israel truly wants to stop the armed resistance and the violent resistance against the occupation, they have to give the Palestinians their rights.
Yes.
Otherwise, whether we like it or not, Mahdi, whether we like it or not, the Palestinian people will have always resist the occupation, because the life that we have endured in Gaza, the life that we are going through, the blockade, the siege, the occupation, the lack of freedom, that makes you take that decision. And yes, if you want to stop the resistance, you have to stop the occupation.
You've described, Pam, this book, this project, as a different way for Palestinians to resist Israeli occupation. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, as Ahmed just discussed, there's all sorts of ways to resist. And, most of our writers, like we actually discussed this in detail. If you remember the Great March of Return, it was a weeks-long, months-long peaceful resistance along the border. And many, many Palestinians participated and were shot,
yes,
lost legs, lost their lives. But a lot of our writers, who were still hoping to maybe one day win a scholarship, didn't want to go that route. They were too afraid to risk. Right. So we had to show them, okay, here's a way to resist that's maybe right for you. Not everybody is prepared to risk their lives.
Yeah.
So this by telling their stories, and what's very important about this book is, yes, they had mentors, but it's mentoring with the very light hand. These are not professional writers. This is their sort of raw, uncut stories. And trust me, this is an act of resistance for them, because a lot of them would be afraid, that if their stories are out there in the world, that they could be targeted. Israel has that ability to do that. Even here in the U.S. now, with five of the writers are in the U.S. at this time and are afraid now. They're literally. I never thought I would get to that point. Yeah.
Ahmed, you and I spoke on MSNBC back in November of 2023. Back then you said, and I quote, "The claim that Israel is attacking Hamas is very silly, very ridiculous. We shouldn't even talk about it." Almost 2 years later, that is still what a lot of the mainstream media are talking about. Even now, we still hear the same excuses, the same lies, the same justifications to keep this genocide going. Where do you see things going from here? What did you make of the Trump, quote-unquote, peace plan that he put out this week, saying that him and Tony Blair would sit on a peace board to run Gaza?
Well, it's just funny that Donald Trump and Tony Blair are talking about peace plans for the Middle East. Tony Blair is the man who invaded Iraq and participated in killing millions or hundreds of thousands of Iraq peaceful civilian people. And Trump is the one who enabled Israel, who aided and abetted the genocide. The bomb that killed my family was manufactured in the US and partially in the UK. So these people talking about peace plan is just ridiculous and silly. And part of why we decided to start We Are Not Numbers is because We Are Not Numbers is that defiance, is the Palestinians' defiance against the occupation. It's the Palestinians' defiance against the mainstream media, who have always reduced the Palestinians into statistics and numbers, and also the mainstream media who have always lied about the Palestinians, who have always provided a coverage that lacks context. At that time when you asked me that question about that about Hamas and Israel, I told you it doesn't worth talking about because the story of my family, is an example of how false that claim is. My family, 21 members of my family, 14 kids included, were sleeping in their home when Israel bombed them. None of them was militant. None of them was fighting Israel. None of them was a threat to Israel. They were sleeping at the heart of Deir al-Balah. All the propaganda and all of the lies of Israel can be refuted by just telling them my story. And that's what we are doing. We're telling the world stories from Gaza, writers of We Are Not Numbers who are young, whose stories are unfiltered. And that is the best way to defy the mainstream media narrative. That is the best way to defy the narrative of the politicians who think of the Palestinians as less than humans, who have been dehumanizing the Palestinians for the past not only 2 years, but for the past 77 years. Unfortunately, we, the Palestinian people, have always been dehumanized. Before the 7th of October, after the 7th of October, before the occupation, after the occupation, Arabs and Muslims and Palestinians have always been viewed as these savages, as these terrorists who don't deserve to live. And we are here to tell them, no, we are human beings. Not only human beings, we're amazing, wonderful human beings who have stories. And we have stories to tell.
Could I add something?
Sure.
One thing I really object to is when we repeatedly characterize this as a war or a conflict between Israel and Hamas. To me, it's against the resistance, because Israel has always opposed any resistance that existed. Before Hamas, they opposed Yasser Arafat.
Yes.
There's never been any type of resistance movement that they have supported. And also...
Armed or unarmed?
What? Yes,
Armed
exactly. And that's the next point, is that, anytime you have oppression and you've tried all sorts of nonviolent ways and they don't work, some people are going to resort to violence. That is human nature. Look at American history.
Yes, Americans understand that more than anyone else.
So if you read the book, to me, the book is an answer to why October 7th happened. You go 10 years back and you read through each chapter, even in years when Americans weren't hearing about war, not only were there attacks all the time, but there was this structural violence that is equally important to understand. The lack of electricity, the lack of drinkable water, the inability to travel, the unemployment rate because they couldn't export.
Yes.
You can't endure that year after year after year and not expect anything to happen in response.
Ahmed, if there's one thing that you want readers to take away from this book, what would that be?
I want you to look at the Palestinians as neither victims nor heroes, no supernaturals, no angels, no subhumans. I want the world to know that the Palestinian people are human beings who have lived exceptional circumstances, who have been suffering for the past 77 years and more, who have been through violence, who have been through occupation, blockade, a genocide. And these Palestinians, they just yearn to live, to love, to live like normally human beings. These people, they have stories. Please read the stories of the Palestinian people, because the moment you read their stories, you will understand how this world works, all of this world. This is not about the Palestinians and the Israelis anymore. This is about humanity. And any person who have a shade of humanity, they will support their brothers and sisters who have been genocided for the past 2 years. Enough is enough. It is time that the Palestinians live. It is time that the Palestinians breathe. It is time for the genocide to end. And it's time for the occupation, all of the occupation to end.
Pam, last question to you. The publishing of this book does not mark the end of the We Are Not Numbers project. How can those who are in a position to help somehow get involved in your project, people watching at home?
Well, yes. In fact, what's amazing, I think truly amazing, is despite the violence that's occurring and this systematic effort to destroy them, we have more writers than ever. And, we send out these weekly newsletters and there's new stories every week. And that testifies that they will not be silent. They haven't been scared into going underground and not caring about sharing their stories and living and loving. So the project is surviving and actually flourishing. And there's all sorts of ways to get involved. You know, we have this group of volunteer mentors for people who are professional writers, but buy the book, because you know in the U.S., as Ahmed was mentioning earlier, President Trump has suspended all visas for Palestinian passport holders. He does not want you to hear these stories.
Yes.
So buy the book, read it, then share it with a family member or a friend. That would be the best thing to do.
Well said. I can't agree more. It's called We Are Not Numbers. The book is out now. My Zeteo fellow colleague and friend Naomi Klein calls the book a miracle on the front page. Pam, Ahmed, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.